Right, next topic, Unit 3.6, Social Behaviour, Higher Biology. So in the last topic, we looked at sort of relationships between different species of animals, and we had parasitism and mutualism, and now what we're looking at is social behaviour. So that's behaviour within species, I suppose. I think it's all within one species we're looking at here. How they help each other, how there's a hierarchy, and so on. So the first thing is social hierarchy, and that is when individuals within the group within a particular area are organised into order of rank, with dominant and subordinate members. So the dominant being the boss and the subordinate being ones that will follow what the dominant ones are doing. And this is where the word pecking order comes from. This is behaviour that you'll see in chickens. And what will happen is you'll have the dominant individuals which carry out some sort of threat displays to keep the others in line. So as you can see here, it could be baring of teeth, for example, with dogs or similar animals. And then what you have in return is the subordinate animals, they carry out appeasement behaviour. So you can see here you've got the dominant one on the left-hand side, and then what you've got on the right-hand side, this subordinate animal, it's got its front paw raised, its ears are back, its tail is down, so it's demonstrating to the other dog that it's not going to pose any threat. So why does this happen? So there's reasons why it benefits all the members within the group, and one of the things that happens is you'll have animals that will form alliances, so that will try and get them to move up and increase their social status within a group. Perhaps maybe with older members of the wolf pack, for example. And then what this means is that, first of all, you've got experienced leadership. So you'll have the one that's maybe been involved in having to fight for a mate or whatever else, or is the one that's been able to successfully seek out food, has given some sort of benefit to the group. Generally, it could well be the ones that are older, so you've got experienced leadership. And this goes back to natural selection as well. So the one that's going to be the best leader, it's more likely to be able to mate. So the best genes are then passed on to the offspring. We'll talk about gorillas later on, but the silverback is the dominant male, and it will generally there's only one silverback, and it will mate with all the females. So you would assume that the best genes would be passed on if he's managed to get to that role within the group. And here is just an example of how a silverback gorilla will assert its position at the top of the food chain, as it were. So at the top of the rankings within that gorilla, within that group of gorillas. So you can watch this. If you just Google that, YouTube that, you should find it. So here's a wee exercise. This is called Who's the Boss? So what you've got here is chickens. We've not given them actual names. They're just been relegated, just being known by letters. So you've got A to H, and you've got on the left-hand side, this is the chicken giving the pecks. And then down this side, you've got the chicken receiving the pecks. So I'm hoping that you can sort of work that out. And as I mentioned before, this is what's called the pecking order. And obviously, if the chicken is receiving a lot of pecks, then it's being kept in its place. So what you have got here then is something slightly similar. So this is finches. So what you had with the pecking order of the chickens is you had one which gave a lot of pecks, and that meant it was at the top of the pecking order, and the one that was just getting pecked to bits, so it was down in the bottom. What you've got here is confrontations between 5 male finches. So these are a type of bird, small bird, famously studied by Darwin in the Galapagos Islands when he was postulating his theory of natural selection. So these 5 birds were observed, and they're all male, and there was 20 confrontations between them. So quite often they'll just kind of face up to each other. It might, with most animals, it might not actually get to the sort of fighting stage. One of them will back off eventually. And what you've got is the score out of 20 points in the contest. So you imagine T and Q squared up 20 times, and T was the winner 17 times, and Q was the winner 3 times. So what I'd like you to do is um, go just complete the table basically. So work out um, which one is going to be the winner in each particular face-off. Then once you've done that, that should allow you, by using the final column, the net number of contests won, that should allow you to work out the pecking order. So give us the pecking order at the end, with the sort of dominant on the left to the most subordinate, the one that won the fewest on the right hand side. So press pause and do that. So this is what you should have, and then if you kind of pick apart the numbers in there, what you would find out is the most successful was R. So it won all of its battles, followed by P, then T, then S, then poor old Q, which lost every time. So it's maybe one of the younger birds potentially, and it's down the bottom. So that's your sort of rank order. You've got your subordinate and dominant individuals. Now, something that will happen even within that group, if you've got these dominant individuals and others which are not so, you will have cooperative hunting. So that is just as it sounds. So that is simply when individuals hunt as a group. Why do it? So this is a good example of it. That is a baby, or certainly a young elephant, and if one of those female lions was by itself, then it's not going to be able to take down that animal. So that's one thing. First of all, a benefit of cooperative hunting is you can hunt larger prey. Also, better chance of success, isn't there, if there's more of you hunting the animal. And in terms of energy, what happens is you've got each individual using less energy and gaining more food than if they'd been hunting individually. So although it's maybe more challenging to take down a large animal, if they manage to achieve that with others, and although it's shared out, it's more energy efficient, I suppose. They're gaining more energy from food, and they're using less energy than if they'd had to try and do it alone. If you see if there's a lion or a similar animal that's trying to hunt a big prey by itself, then it's perhaps one that's really kind of getting desperate. Usually they'll hunt in a group. And yeah, something as well. You have the dominant animals who will probably be they will maybe offer the most in terms of the hunt, and they'll be the ones who get first picking. So they'll be the ones that will get their fill of the animal first of all, but then they'll move away once they're full, and then the subordinate animals will also get in, so they'll benefit too. So here's some social behaviour for you to have a look at. So the first one, you should be able to find these quite easily. So orca wave washing is orca whales hunting a seal, I think it is, and then lions v elephant, as you would expect. So another type of social behaviour is defence. So we've switched in here from cooperative hunting to defending yourself, and this is summarised succinctly by just saying safety in numbers. The more of you there are more eyes and ears and so on. So if you get social defence, if you're working for the group, this increases the chances of survival. So first of all, yes, it means you're more likely to be able to spy. In this case, it'd be a hawk, some sort of raptor that'd be after the meerkats. So you're being you're offered protection from that, but at the same time you can then have the others going out looking for food, so you're kind of maximising that, the energy. You're giving somebody protection while they get food for everybody else. And what you tend to see is something like this. So you have these specialised formations. So I think we have baboons here perhaps, and you can see that in the middle you have the youngest ones, and they are protected because they're in the middle of the group. So the vulnerable are protected. So a little activity related to this. So an experiment was set up to investigate the attacks of a predatory bird, a goshawk, on different sized flocks of pigeon. So there you've got the number of pigeons in the flock and then the percentage attack success of the goshawk. So press pause, 3 questions for you to have a go at. So first of all, what is the optimum flock size for the pigeons? So the optimum is the one with the lowest percentage attack success, which is 50 plus. And then what is the relationship between the size of pigeon flock and attack success of goshawk? So this one is really an exam technique question, because it's not difficult really, but it's just wording your sentence correctly. So you should be saying, as the size of the pigeon flock increases, attack success of goshawks decreases. So you're using the words in the question to come up with your answer, and then give a reason for the relationship described. So it could be that the more pigeons there are, the more likely that their goshawks are going to be spotted. Or you could say that, I don't know particularly if this is the case for pigeons, but you could say younger members of the flock are protected in the middle, and they would be the most likely to be caught by the goshawk. So there's your answers. Yep. So yeah, you could mention social, give this a general term for what's going on there as well, social defence. Okay, I want you to put down numbers, I think it's 1 to 5 or maybe 6, and I've enlisted the help of the art department, and they've drawn a few examples of social behaviour. So I want you to name the social behaviour. So remember, your 3 were the social hierarchy, you've got social defence and cooperative hunting, and I want you to name each one and describe what is happening. So that's number 1. Press pause and do that. Number 2. 3. 4. 5. This might be the last one, I'm not sure. Oh, there's another one. Okay, there's number 6. So the first one here, this is social hierarchy, and what you've got, I'm hoping that you're able to identify these as wolves. So they are feeding on the sheep, and it's in a pecking order. I suppose that's demonstrated, or the kind of key. You'll be able to work that out from this guy at the back here, waiting his turn. Number 2, this is a group of lions hunting reindeer. I think my daughter was involved in this, so her maybe the kind of knowledge of biology is maybe not what it could be. I'm not sure if lions and reindeer live in the same same ecosystem, but anyway, you get the point. So cooperative hunting is this one. This one is social defence. So this is the fishes are schooling as the shark attacks. That is a shark. Number 4, this is social defence. Meerkats, I think. And the benefits increases the chance of survival, and the vulnerable are protected. This one is social hierarchy. So the benefits of that, the best genes pass on to offspring and you get experienced leadership. This is just teachers jumping to the front of the dinner queue, which this is maybe school hierarchy rather than social hierarchy, but hopefully you worked it out. And number 6, the last one, we have got some sort of large dinosaur plant eater. There's a wee tear coming from its eye, and it's been hunted by these things. So this is cooperative hunting. And the benefits of that, you can hunt bigger prey, you've got an increased chance of success, and there's more energy gained than hunting alone. Time for a break. Hello, to begin with today, last time we looked at 3 different types of social behaviour. So here is a description of them all. So I would just put down numbers 1 to 13 and I'll press pause and write down your answers, just missing words. Okay, so the first one, social hierarchy. So something and something members in a group. So that should be dominant and subordinate. And alliances can be formed to increase status. And then the benefits of social hierarchy. Number 3, you have experienced leadership. And then number 4, the best genes are passed on to offspring. Cooperative hunting is number 5, when animals hunt as a group. And the benefits, we've got 4 benefits here. So number 6 can hunt larger prey, increased chance of 7 success, hunting success. Each individual uses less. Number 8 is energy than if hunting alone. And number 9, subordinate animals benefit. And then we've got social defence as the last one. So in summary, it is safety in numbers and increased chance of something, as some individuals can look for predators while others forage. That is survival. And lastly, specialised, 12 is formations, protect, the 13 is vulnerable. So the next part of this, we're going to look at altruism and also something called kin selection. And then we're on to insects. So we're going to look at what the roles of different members are within a colony of insects. So we're going to things like ants and termites, bees. So to begin with, altruism is a word you might have heard, in relation to humans. So altruism is basically helping somebody or being kind without looking for anything in return, and immediately what it does is it harms the donor but benefits the recipient. So if you think back to mutualism, you had both benefited. Parasitism, you had one benefited and the other harmed, whereas this is the strange thing. So it actually harms the donor. They're using energy, they're going out of their way to do something, and it benefits the recipient. But it is often reciprocal. So the roles reverse later on in social animals. So here we have down the bottom vampire bats. So you have this hungry bat on the left hand side, and you have this one which has got its fill of blood. And who knows, maybe this one on the left is injured or is low in energy or whatever. This one will give it some of its food, and then this could be reciprocated later on. So maybe the next night, the hungry bat will go out, the one that's been fed here, and will return the favour. Oh, hiya. Vampire bats are quite interesting, so I thought I would just give you a bit more information. There's the fangs there. So bats mostly eat insects, so there's only 3 of them that actually feed on blood, and that's 3 out of 1,400. So it's a tiny percentage of bats which are actually feeding on blood. Most will eat insects. You've probably heard of fruit bats as well. And the 3 vampire types are the vampire bat types are the common, the hairy-legged, the white-winged, and they're found in the Americas, so Uruguay, Mexico, Brazil, around about that area. And they're just wee things, 9 centimetres long, which is not much despite having that kind of ferocious reputation, and their wingspan is 18 centimetres, so small. And the way it works is what they do is they'll go out at night, and what they do is they'll land close to large animals, and then they can actually crawl a wee bit. You wouldn't like to be sleeping and see one of these crawling towards you, would you? So they crawl over to feed, and then this is what we talked about before. So what they'll do is they'll share bloods with bats who may have failed to feed that night. So maybe, I talked about one being maybe ill or poorly or whatever. It could also be that you've got bats that are going back, and what they found is that some of them haven't been able to get food, they've failed. So they'll be fed by the others, and then should the next night one fail and the other successful, then that will be the favour is returned. So that's your reciprocal altruism. And the problem with these is they can spread disease. So the rabies is one that's associated with bats, which is can be a virus which infects the nervous system. So here's a recent example. So 10 years ago, you had 4 children who died after they were being bitten and contracting rabies. So obviously with humans, the humans can be bitten by vampire bats, but I guess you're maybe more likely to be, they're not going to be able to feed for a particular length of time. Maybe that's easier with cattle. And you can have a look at this. Just search for altruism on YouTube. Now, altruistic behaviour is, as you might expect, more common if you're related to the person. Okay, and here's a graph showing this. So, there's a spelling mistake. Percentage. Here's the percentage probability of helping. So, if you're not related to someone, then you're a 16% chance of helping. I guess this isn't covering stuff, friendships or people you've grown up with. Cousins 20%, grandchildren 70%, brothers sisters 85%. And the reason why you're more likely to help, or the term that's given to this is kin selection. So that is helping your kin. Why do it? So not necessarily something that you would think of automatically, but in terms of evolution and going back to genetics, what can happen is the donor can benefit indirectly. So increased chance of sharing genes surviving to next generation. So I suppose if you share your lunch with your brother, you're not exactly thinking, oh, that means that there's a better chance in 40 years of my genetics being passed on through my, him having a nephew or whatever. But that is, this is how it's thought to have evolved. So it increases the chance of genes which you share being passed on. So that was altruism. The next thing we're going to look at is insects. And the first thing that we have to say about insects is there's a bit of concern about numbers decreasing. It's said that if you were out in your car in the countryside 30, 40 years ago, you might have to stop occasionally to wipe dead insects off your windshield, whereas that's not quite the case anymore. Why should we be worried though? For a few reasons. So the first one is pollination. So a lot of our food crops are reliant on pollinators such as bees moving pollen in between different crops in order basically allowing the plants to reproduce. They're important for those reasons. Also as in a food source, so you from your food webs and food chains, if you take something out of it, it can have an effect on various different living things within a food web. The knock-on effects can be fairly dramatic. And also decomposers as well, so they help break down food. But the kind of the one that's probably most in the news and the one we're most concerned about is pollinators. The role as pollinators. So, what is it? So here's a bee. So it's collecting nectar to make honey, and as it does this, and butterflies do it too, what happens is they'll pick up a bit of pollen, which is the equivalent of sperm, so it's the sex cell in flowering plants, and they'll carry it over to another flower and they'll rub it off onto the female part, which is called the stigma, and then you'll have fertilization fruit will be produced sometimes, and this allows the plant to reproduce. So here's our pollinators. I wonder if you can identify these different species. The one on the left, well, we've got moths, we've got wasps, we've got beetles, we've got butterflies. The main one is honeybees on the left here. So they approximately, about a third of our crops are pollinated by honeybees, but various different insects, hundreds of species are capable of doing it. So what can we do? Something you might have noticed as you've been going about the car is that the various local councils have made the decision to let grass verges grow longer. You'll maybe see it as you go about, and it maybe doesn't look so neat, but if you allow it to grow, then what happens is you'll start to have some of the wildflower coming up and clover and things like that, and that gives insects a food source. So I think there are more people, and I certainly see it out, when I'm about, there's people letting their grass grow a little bit longer, or they'll have an area of their garden that they've maybe put down wildflower seeds or something like that. I think people are beginning to do that. So yeah, having your grass dead short all the time is a kind of, in terms of biodiversity, it's pretty dead. So letting your grass grow a little longer. Don't use pesticides either, because they can get into the systems of these insects and do damage. Compost, organic matter as well is good. Also leave dead wood in a shady area, so they just allow you'll know about lifting over wood and finding slaters and things like that. So leave dead wood in a shady area allows a good environment for insects, and also grow flowers that pollinators love, which I'll show you some examples that you could get. So this is foxglove on the left hand side. This one here is marjoram. Honeysuckle's good as well, and this bottom one, which particularly people will grow just for the smell of it, but if you see lavender, quite a few people I've seen have got lavender in their gardens. I've got lavender in my garden as well, and it's just when you get to summer months, there'll just be insects on them constantly, so it's a great thing to have, and a nice smell as well. And you can cut off the flowers and put them in your house, as some people do. I wanted to mention honey as well, and that's what bees feed on, and it is the most energy-rich food in nature. So naturally, the most energy-rich food. And if you think about what you eat, which is sweet, and where it's come from, you're not going to get, sugar and things like that available here, or but what you can get is honey. So for most of human history, it was basically the only sweet food you could get. So the diet would have been pretty bland. Obviously, we're getting to the stage now we're kind of overdosing on the sweet stuff, and even for making alcohol as well. We have, if you drink wine, that's coming from grapes. You can't really grow grapes in the UK, maybe in the southeast of England, perhaps. But for a long, long time, mead. That is fermented honey. It was the most popular drink in countries where grapes couldn't be grown. For example, here I have never had mead in my life, but maybe I should give it a try. But yeah, mead is fermented honey, and that was your alcoholic drink for a long time in a lot of countries, because it was all you could make basically. So our social insects, we have got bees, wasps, ants and termites are included in this. So we've talked about the importance of pollination, so what about insect behaviour now? So in terms of breeding, only some individuals are fertile, and they're called the queens, so that's the female, and then the drones, and they look a little bit different. So there's the queen in the middle there. Drone is on the left hand side, and on the right hand side you have got the lowly worker. And there's just to give you an idea, so this in the middle here, which has been painted, got a wee green spot on it to identify it, that's the queen there. So slightly different colouring, a bit bigger, surrounded. I assume that's the workers around her. And there's a sequence of events which has to happen in order for a bee to become a queen, and you can find out about it if you watch this. So as mentioned, you've only got the queen and the drones who are fertile, so most of the individuals are sterile, and we call them the workers. And what they do, hopefully you can see that is ants. And what they do is they cooperate to raise offspring that they share genes with. So it could be we'll get into some of the details here. What you've got here is, I think these are leafcutter ants, so they're taking back leaves to the nests, which are digested and used as food. But you should know what this is. We talked about it before. So if you're helping somebody that's related to you, because you share genes with them and are more likely to be passed on, that's called kin selection. So that's the reason why you have these worker ants and wasps and so on. So what do they do? So first of all, collect food. There's your leafcutter ants. Defend the hive as well, so they're protecting the queen essentially, and all the food and the larvae within the hive or the nest. And this is quite good. So what you've got here, you might have heard of this. This is that a wasp or a bee? Can't quite see. So you perform a waggle dance to show direction of food, and I think it's only been discovered fairly recently how this works. But yeah, the animal will come back to the hive and do a little dance, and by the way in which it loops around, it shows the direction of where the food is, and the others fly out to get it. Here it is here. So by measuring the angle of the dance in relation to the sun and the length of the time the bee waggled its abdomen while moving in a figure-of-8 pattern, researchers have been able to map the distance and location where bees forage from month to month. So yeah, they're obviously not daft if they're able to just watch one of their fellow bees do this, and then as a result can go out and find food. So that's bees. Ants, just to give you some ant facts. So 25% of the Earth's land animal biomass is made up of ants. So they're very small, but in terms of mass, if you were to pile them up, it would be about the same as humans. And the one we see in Scotland is the common black ant, and they will feed on other insects and also sugary substances, so like rotten fruit. And obviously, you know, they'll come into your house and get whatever they can. And something they do, which is again pretty smart, is that they farm aphids. So these are greenfly. So what they do is they remove fungi and protect them from ladybirds. So you might remember biological control. You can add ladybirds to get rid of greenfly if they're feeding on your crops. So what's the point of ants helping greenfly? Well, what they do is they eat plant sap, and then they digest it and they excrete what's called honeydew, which the ants can then consume. So the aphids themselves can't, the ants themselves can't get the nutrients out of the plant sap. However, if they eat basically the aphids' poo, I suppose, then they have got a source of energy. So that's why they look after the aphids. So the ones that kind of give people the heebie-jeebies is the winged ones, I suppose, and these are the males and also what's known as the princesses. So the princesses are the better nourished females, and they are better nourished because they're being kind of primed to become queens. So in July, that's when they fly and they mate in flight. And after mating, what happens is you've got your new queen. So the princess becomes a queen, finds a new site, and then chews off her wings, which be a source of energy, burrow into the soil, then blocks up the burrow entrance. And there we go. So the queen then uses the liquid which is produced in the breakdown of her wing muscles to feed the first generation of workers. Then the new workers break out of the nest and forage for food. The queen at this point in time is not doing great, So they bring back food to nurse her back to health, and there you have your new ant colony. And some nice little videos here, so search for these on YouTube and it'll give you some images rather than just listen to me talk about it. Okay, here is a quiz. I like quizzes. So I want you to write down either true or false for each of these facts related to social insects. Number 1, most wasps, so that is queens, workers and drones, are able to survive winter. 2, electrostatic forces make negatively charged pollen jump to positively charged bees. 3, the queen bee will mate with only one drone. So true or false for each of those. Then 4, it is estimated that there are a quadrillion ants living on Earth at any one time. 5, the ejaculation of bee drones is so powerful that their penises become detached from their body and they die. So, true or false for each of them. So number 1, most wasps are able to survive winter. That's false. So only the queen wasp survives, so it hibernates, and then the worker bees, they do survive and huddle around their queen. Number 2, electrostatic forces make negatively charged pollen jump to positively charged bees. That is true. Number 3, the queen bee will mate with only one drone. That is false. She will mate mid-flight with up to 20 drones. Number 4, a quadrillion ants. That's true. And number 5, the ejaculation of bee drones is so powerful that their penises become detached from their body and they die. Now, I suppose what you have to think, if this is false, then I've made that up, which would be quite a vivid imagination, so it is true. And here's something for you to watch as well, going back to talking about pollination. What happens if all the bees die? Okay, to begin with, just some revision from last time. So number 1, describe how social insects produce offspring. 2, describe 2 roles of workers. And 3, explain why workers help the colony. Press pause, write down answers for those. So number 1, most of the colony, the workers, they're sterile with only some individuals, that's the female queens and the male drones, able to reproduce. So if the workers can't reproduce, what do? So they can collect food, defend the nest, perform a waggle dance to show the direction of food to others, explain why workers help the colony. So this is the idea of kin selection. So they help raise offspring because they are related to them. So the last section of this, or the last thing we're going to talk about, is primates. So we just had social behaviour in insects, so now we're going to look at the hierarchy within primates. So just to, first of all, what is a primate? So here are 4 different species of primate. So we've got lemur, top left, gorilla, human, this is a younger Sean Batty from STV News, and chimpanzees. Okay, so this is what we're talking about in terms of primates, all closely include us and animals closely related to us. I think we might have seen this before when we did evolution, but there's our close relatives, and if you compare gorillas and humans, we're 98.4% the same genetically. We separated, there was something which lived about 7 million years ago, and some of those animals underwent natural selection and became us, and some became gorilla. Gorilla, I think is the species name. So where do you find gorillas? So we are in, this is the continent of Africa, and you can see we're over this area, so round about sort of Cameroon is the western, and then you've got some over here round about Uganda, Rwanda area. So what do they eat? Mostly vegetarian, but they will eat small insects. And in terms of the social hierarchy, you will have heard, I think, of the silverbacks. So within what's called a troop, so that's the group of gorillas, you've got one silverback, you've got multiple adult females and their offspring. So the silverback he's the main man, so he's the centre of the troop's attention. He makes all the decisions. If there's any kind of conflicts, he sorts it out. And he is responsible for the well-being, the safety of everyone within the troop. So, great example of that social hierarchy. And just to get, we talked how similar we are genetically, so just to talk about some other similarities. So, from 0 to 5 months, infants remain in contact with their mothers. After 1 year, infants move up to 5 metres from their mothers. 1.5 years, the distance between mother and offspring increases and they might start spending time away from each other. 2.5 years spend only half the time with their mothers, and 3 to 6 years is the juvenile period, so weaned and sleep in a separate nest from their mothers. So still, I suppose thinking a 2.5-year-old human spending half your time away from your mother is would be significant, I suppose, but there's a lot of similarities here, and a lot of other animals. It's pretty early on. The animal will disappear will move away from its mother and become independent. Whereas gorillas, because they have so much complex behaviour to learn, they'll stay with it around their mothers for long periods of time, for years. So here's just your human comparison. So it's similar to us because we have got so much complex behaviour to learn. By the time other animals are, considered adult, we still get humans at the age of 4, beginning to share and take turns with other children, play make believe at age 3, and so on. So we have that period that we need in order to learn the behaviour that makes us human. So primate behaviour, and yeah, we aren't just we're talking about ourselves here as well, remember. So you've got that long period of parental care, and the reason why is we have complex social behaviour which must be learned. And it's learned through play, basically. And watch this little video, Gorilla Mums. So it just shows you a couple of gorilla mums with their offspring. So the social hierarchy, we talked about this before generally when we mentioned social hierarchy a couple of lessons ago. So you have this ritualistic display. So you have chest beating, could be shrieking, and then you'll have appeasement behaviour. So the gorilla that it's up against, when it's decided it's going to chuck it, it's not going to try and outcompete the silverback maybe that's in charge of the troop. They'll lower their eyes, and that will reduce conflict. So you have that you have appeasement behaviour in response to that sort of aggressive behaviour. And we said before, you'll have alliances forming within when you have social hierarchy, and in primate groups you'll have behaviour such as grooming. And the point of that, I mean, I guess they're removing ticks. There is whatever is a bit of a benefit to it, but they will just do it in order to become closer to other members of the troop, so as to increase social status. Wow. You might be wondering what's going on here. So that is the females. So in some primates, what they'll do is, in order to identify, or in order to indicate to males that they're ready to mate, they'll display their genitalia. So that's not behaviour that you see in humans, but you do see it in some primates. And here's a nice video which might make you cry. So have a look at these. I think in fact there's 2 videos. Okay, so we've covered everything in social behaviour. So just to finish off, let's see if you could produce what was required if it was an exam paper. So try this. So write notes on social behaviour in animals under the following headings. So part 1, social hierarchy and cooperative hunting, and then part 2, social insects. Press pause and do that. So the first part of this definition, social hierarchy is a rank order or is a pecking order within a group of animals, or you've got a dominant and subordinate animals. Number 2, you have got aggression, or you've got fighting, you've got conflict or violence, which is reduced as a result of social hierarchy. And you might have ritualistic displays, appeasement displays. You could also say that alliances form to increase social status, and you should also mention as well that the best genes get passed on to offspring, or you can have some benefit of it. It guarantees experienced leadership. So you can get a maximum of 3 from those 4. Also so cooperative hunting is where animals hunt in a group together, but you need a bit more than that. So you need to give a benefit as well. So increases hunting success, allows you to hunt larger prey, or more successful than hunting alone. And then a couple of other benefits. Animals get more food or energy than hunting alone, and less energy is used or lost per individual. For insects, you get a mark just for giving a couple of examples. So if you said, for example, bees and ants are social insects, that would be a mark. And then a description here to do with breeding. So only some members of the colony are fertile, or you can name them. The queens and the drones mate, or the queen lays eggs, or you could say the workers are sterile. Next mark, if you say one thing the workers do, such as defend the hive or collect food, then you get a mark for saying there is kin selection between related individuals. And then the 5th mark there is for talking about why that's beneficial, or why kin selection is a thing. So it helps survival of shared genes. So genes that you possess, you're helping them be passed on to the next generation. Okay, a wee bit of revision from the last few topics. So some key terms here, you know what to do. So this is from symbiosis, animal welfare, and what have we just done? Social behaviour. So press pause, find out what each of the word is, and write down what it means or put it in a higher biology level sentence. Okay, here's the answers. The first one is stereotypy, 2 is apathy, 3 is vector, 4 mutualism, 5 parasite, 6 is symbiosis, misdirected is 7, 8 is free range, 9 is altruistic, and Hirsch-Year is hierarchy. So stereotypy would be an example of poor animal welfare, so it would be repetitive behaviour such as a lion pacing back and forward in a zoo. Apathy is another example of poor welfare, so poor animal welfare, so it could be, well, sticking with the example of lions, it could be a mother lion not looking after its young, or it could be, say, a pig which is not allowing its young to suckle, for example. Number 3, vector is something which carries a parasite. So the example that we had was mosquitoes carrying the Plasmodium parasite. Mutualism is when 2 animals have a relationship in which they both benefit. So for example, you had the birds which was feeding off ticks on a zebra. So the bird gets food and the zebra has a tick removed, which is taking energy from it. Parasite is something which harms another organism to its own benefit. Symbiosis is interdependent relationships between living things. Misdirected behaviour is, again, this is the third one we've had, which is an example of poor animal welfare. So it's behaviour that an animal would do normally, like plucking, but taken to the nth degree, it's doing it too much, so over plucking to the point where the animal's kind of lost a significant number of feathers. Free range, so if animals were free range, that it would make, the best example is your eggs. I suppose it means that the hens have been allowed to roam in an area rather than being cooped up in sort of factory type situations. So that would be of benefit to the animal. Altruistic behaviour is when the donor is harmed and there's someone else benefits, and you could say that this favour might be returned later. You could also talk about kin selection here, so you may help another individual to the detriment to yourself because that individual shares genes with you. And then hierarchy, so social hierarchy found, for example, within primates, where you have a dominant individual and subordinates. You could talk about a benefit of that being experienced leadership, or the best genes are passed on to the next generation.